Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 6, Text 4. Nityam
Nityam
Dati
Dati
Kamasya
Kamasya
Anuye
Anuye
Raya Yogina Reta Maitrasya Patyo Deva Umshtali Nityam Dadati Kamasya
Nityam Dadati Kamasya
Chidram Tamanugiraya
Chidram Tamanugiraya
Yogina Krita Metrasya
Yogina Krita Metrasya
Bhaktujaiva Pumshtali
Bhaktujaiva Pumshtali
Nityam Dadati Kamasya
Nityam Dadati Kamasya
Chidram Tamanugiraya
Chidram Tamanugiraya
Yogina Krita Metrasya
Yogina Krita Metrasya
Bhaktujaiva Pumshtali. So Lord Rishabhdev is continuing to emphasize the importance of controlling the mind for one who wants to succeed spiritually. Some of the characteristics of the mind as explained by Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. We discuss how the mind is restless, turbulent, strong, obstinate, and how the uncontrolled mind can create havoc with a spiritual effort. The reason why the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita is emphasizing controlling the mind again and again is because the mind is a leader of the senses. And in the presence of an uncontrolled mind, spiritual advancement becomes difficult. In the Krishna book you read the story of how when Rukmini was about to be married, she sent a messenger to the Lord saying, "Please rescue me! I'm going to be married to Srishipala." This was the marriage was taking place against her wishes. So the Lord, he received a Brahmin and he said, "Is your mind peaceful? Because unless the mind is peaceful, it's hard to endeavor spiritually, it's hard to succeed spiritually." So all these instructions are designed with the purpose of eventually making our mind peaceful. Now in this verse, Lord Rishabhdev gives a very wonderful example. A married woman who has a lover. What happens sometimes? The lover kills the husband. We've all heard of this so many times in the present day environment. So similarly, a yogi who gives his mind a chance to wander around in the mature area and does not restrain it, then he can also kill his spiritual life. The uncontrolled mind, as Lord Rishabhdev here is explaining, will give facility to the anarthas of the enemies of spiritual life. Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mad, Matsarya. These are identified as the enemies of spiritual life. Lust, anger, greed, madness, envy, and illusion. These are the cause of the living entity transmigrating from one body to another. So one who has the mind in control, he doesn't get influenced by these enemy anarthas. Arjuna asked Krishna, how is it that one is compelled into sinful acts even unwillingly? What did the Lord say? Kama is a krodha rajaguna samata. It is lust only, the all-devouring enemy of the living entity which is always burning like fire and is never satisfied. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, you read about so many wonderful stories which all have a very powerful purpose. For example, you read the story of a king called 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐭𝐫𝐚𝐜𝐿. He was cursed by Shukracharya to assume an old body, but even he was also given a benediction that if he found someone who would exchange his old body for youth, he could become youthful again. Shukracharya was very upset that Shukracharya was his father-in-law, and he was very upset that he had shown favor to another maidservant friend of his daughter. Finally managed to get his youngest son to agree to exchange his youth for old age. So the king went on. He had full facility for sense enjoyment. And for 4,000 years, he engaged in sense enjoyment. And what was the conclusion? He was not satisfied. He said, I was like a lusty goat. A lusty goat. Prabhupada used to give the example. A goat is standing in front of the slaughterhouse, and if it gets a chance to mate, it will gladly avail of it, not realizing that at any time it can be slaughtered. So King Yadi's conclusion was that just like you can never put up a fire as long as you go on pouring water, you can never really satisfy the senses by engaging in activities of sense enjoyment. The Bhagavatam gives an example that just like if you have a skin disease, when you scratch on it, initially you may get some relief, but then by that activity of scratching, the disease becomes more severe. So, lust has to be controlled by positive engagement of the mind and senses in service to the Lord. An elephant, when it becomes very lusty, what do? Pour water. And then the lust goes away. Of course, in the case of human beings, it's not so simple. You can be under the water, but it's not going to go away. The alternative is to engage the mind and senses positively. Then anger, that's identified as another anartha. We get angry so fast. Wherever you go, devotees say, how can I control my anger? So anger should not be used when you don't realize some material facility or honor that you think it is. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preached the path of humility. But we saw that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very angry when he heard that Nityananda was attacked by Madai. So anger is an obstacle. And anger should only be used when you hear the Lord or his devotees being blasphemed. Greed is identified as another anartha or obstacle. In the 7th canto, Narada Muni explains to Yudhishthira Maharaj as follows. He says, a hungry man can be satisfied when you give him food to eat. A thirsty man can be satisfied when you give him water to drink. An angry man can be satisfied once he's already let the steam out or shouted. But Narada Muni says, a greedy man can never be satisfied. So you see the greedy people in society, they're never satisfied. They keep endeavoring, so that they can make more money for material facilities. A man's greed knows no limit. The greedy materialist is only thinking, how much I have today and how much more I should accumulate. And in order to realize that unlimited material greed, they are willing to take part in any activity. I heard the biggest exporter of beef out of India. In India, generally, they don't take house, they don't eat beef, export Christians and Muslims. But the biggest exporter of beef out of India is not a Muslim or a Christian, but is a Hindu. So, mature man, individual is greedy, he'll do anything to make it. So, envy is another anartha. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, you read a very wonderful story of Sarvabhaumacharya inviting Lord Chaitanya for prasad. So whenever Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would travel to different locations, different household of devotees would invite him for prasad. So he was invited for prasad by Sarvabhaumacharya. Sarvabhaumacharya at one time was an impersonalist, but by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he became a great devotee of the Lord. Sarvabhaumacharya had one daughter who was married to an individual called Amara. Could not comprehend the supreme position of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Yeah. He had envy about the position of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to go for lunch prasad to Sarvabhaumacharya's house, his wife would out of love prepare a wide variety of dishes. She was a great cook. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would eat very little. And Sarvabhaumacharya would stand at the gate with a stick to make sure that Amoga could not see the various offerings that were presented to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One day, Sarvabhaumacharya had to leave the door to help his wife, so which gave Amoga the opportunity to come in and see the various items that were placed on the table where Lord Chaitanya was eating. So Amoga said, "Look at this sannyasi! Pretends to be an unseen, but he's eating swallow." So Sarvabhaumacharya chased him out of the house, ran behind him, but couldn't catch up. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu inquired from Gopinathacharya how was Amoga doing. And he was told that he was severely ill and was about to die. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to see him. After all, he was the son-in-law of his beloved devotee, Sarvabhaumacharya. So Lord Chaitanya placed his hand on the chest of Amoga and said, "As long as you have envy in the heart, Krishna will not reside over there." And Amoga, it was repentant for what he had done, fell at the feet of the Lord and became a great devotee. So envy should be avoided. Prabhupada used to talk to us about spiritual envy. Just like you have spiritual envy amongst the gopis. You see someone doing service, you endeavor to do something better. Rather than indulge in leg pulling, criticizing, and so on. So Lord Rishabhdev is emphasizing that the mind must be kept in control. If the mind is let loose, if the mind is not kept in control, then it will give facilities to these anarthas. And these anarthas will dominate our activities. And what if these anarthas are allowed to dominate, then what's going to happen? Then it's going to be hard to pursue spiritual life. The mind is the root cause of these anarthas. And combined, they constitute bondage to fruitive activity. So what is the solution? We discussed some of these solutions yesterday. Krishna talks about austerities of the mind in the Bhagavad Gita that we should practice. Krishna says in the 18th chapter, Manmana bhava mad bhakta madhyaji manamaskuru bhamavashi satyam te pratijana priyoshime. Become my devotee, offer your homage unto me. Krishna, offer your homage unto me. And if you do these things, I guarantee you that you will come to me without fail. So, we have a solution. We recognize the nature of the mind is turbulent, obstinate, strong, restless. But we have a solution, and we should take advantage of the solution. Those who are sincere of a spiritual life, take advantage of the solution. Krishna says, think of me. So how do you think of Krishna? Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita gives us certain guidelines how to think of him. Think of me as one of the oldest. Purana Purusham Nav Yonam Cha. Lord Brahma says, thou you're the oldest, you appear ever youthful. He's the cause of all causes, container of everything, smaller than the smallest. So there's so many transcendental attributes of the Lord that we can meditate on. Lord Brahma says, Goloka eva nirasati akilatma bhuta. Situated in the Goloka Vrindavan planets, that is all pervasive. How the Lord, with any one part of his body, can do the function of any other part. Yasa sakalendra pratimanti. Each of us can only perform a particular function with one organ. But the Lord can perform any function with any one part of his body. Advaita Machyuta Venadi Ananta Rupa. How he is infallible. Advaita, no different in his body and soul. How he manifests himself in a variety of forms. And these forms are listed. We gain knowledge about these forms in the Bhagavatam. And Lord Brahma also says how we can understand this personality of God. Vedesu durlabam adurlabam atma bhakto. That is, if we just try to understand the Lord through an academic person, we will not succeed. But when it becomes my devotee, he can understand. So this is one aspect of meditation on the Lord. Meditate on his gunas, quality. Then another aspect or another possibility is meditating on the Swarup, the form of the Lord. In ISKCON you have so many wonderful deities around the movement, in nice deities in your own Moscow temple. So have your pick and meditate on the deities. There's Gaurnitai, Radha, Krishna, or Chagram Shilas that you have here, or Gaurdan Shilas that you have in the temple room here. Then meditate on his leelas, pastimes. Krishna says, Janma Karma Chama Divyam. My coming and going is both completely transcendental. In the Krishna book you read about so many wonderful pastimes of the Lord Leelas. So meditate on these different pastimes. How the Lord performed pastimes that are totally inconceivable. How, for example, once the Lord was playing with his friends and someone complained to Mother Yasoda that he had swallowed some dirt. And the mother said, "Did you eat some dirt today?" She was always in anxiety about her son's health. The son said, "No! My brother and his friends got defeated while playing, so they want you to chastise me, so they've lodged a false complaint. If you don't believe me, I'll open my mouth and show it to you." And what did she see? She saw the whole universe, the living entities, the demigods, the three modes of nature, how they work, how the living entity is experiencing the reaction of his karma. So she was bewildered when she saw it. There's so many wonderful pastimes of the Lord. And we have a fortune in that we can still visit these locations where the Lord performed his pastimes. Just like every year, we conduct a Brajmandal Parikrama at Kartik time that gives devotees the opportunity to go to all these locations where the Lord performed his pastimes. So there are so many leelas of the Lord that we can meditate upon. If you want, you can take one leela for a day. They say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. So, if you meditate on one leela of the day, take on a different leela and meditate on the leela all day, that will be a very positive way of engaging the mind, and over a period of time, you'll become expert in so many different leelas. So we meditate on the different leelas of pastimes. Then you meditate on the nama, the power of the holy name. Our chanting of the holy name should not just be mechanical, but should be based on genuine understanding. So meditate how the Lord is so kind that he has invested all his transcendental energies in his holy name, and how the holy name is non-different from the Lord. Nama Chintamani Krishna, Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha, Purna Shuddha Nitya Mukta Bhinnatam Nama Naminaha. How the holy name is completely non-different from the Lord. So these are just some different aspects of how we can endeavor to engage the mind positively so that the mind does not give facility to anger, greed, madness, envy, illusion, etc. In the Bhagavatam, you read the story of Ajamil. Ajamil was born in a Brahmanical family. He had gone to the forest to bring flowers for his puja. And on the way he saw this prostitute embracing her client. So he started meditating on that incident that he saw. And as he started meditating on that incident that he saw, what happened? His spiritual life began to get weaker. He gave first his wife, hired the prostitute as a maidservant, then started living with her as a wife, then produced so many children, engaged in so many sinful activities to satisfy his wife. But how did all this start? It started with his meditating on what he saw. So we should not forget that we should, like in today's environment, we may see so many obscene things. Society is far more degraded today than it was thousands of years ago. But we should make an effort to not meditate on these things that you see. Because if we meditate on that, then that will result in our desiring to execute what you're meditating on. So from the very beginning, we should take a positive approach. That is, engage the mind positively. Amrish Maharaj, thou working with the king, was also a great devotee of the Lord. The Rasa Muni was very upset. Then Amrish Maharaj drank water without waiting for him to return. So he said, now I'm going to teach him a lesson. He came and he produced the demon from his. Amrish Maharaj, on the other hand, Sarve Mana Krishna Padaram in the Yor, was just absorbed in his meditation on the Lord. The Sudarshan Chakra of the Lord came to the rescue of his devotee Amrish. And wherever the Rasa ran, the Sudarshan Chakra, Amrish did not get scared when he saw the powerful demon. He was just absorbed in his meditation on the Lord. Similarly, in the 5th canto, you read the story of Jat Bharat. How Jat Bharat, in his previous birth, was King Bharat. And he renounced his kingdom, beautiful wife, opulence, gone to the forest, where he developed attachment to a deer. And he got so attached to the deer that he couldn't even be separated from the sight of the deer for a second. So one day, when the deer was out of sight, while searching for the deer, King Bharat left his wife. Bhagavad Gita says, Yagnyam vapi smaran bhava. Wherever your mind is, at the moment of death, that's where you get transported to. Prabhupada said that, suppose you built a big house and you're lamenting, now I have to leave this house, oh, I've lived in it only for 20 years, I should have lived in it longer. Then you can come back in that house, but not as the owner of the house, as one of the insects or bugs in the house. So it's important that we learn the art of focusing the mind correctly, as the scriptures say, Adhyanaran Smriti. So King Bharat had to take his birth in a deer's body. But he didn't have to stay for long in the deer's body, and he soon took his birth in the family of a Brahmana, in which he was known as Jat Bharat. So when he took his birth at Jat Bharat, he resolved that I'm not going to do the same mistake that I had done. He pretended in society as if he was deaf and dumb. But he was not deaf and dumb, as we saw when he later on had to instruct King Rahugana. So on one occasion, Jat Bharat, because he was acting deaf and dumb, he was being mistreated by his stepbrothers, and he was asked to guard a paddy field. And the dacoits kidnapped. Actually, initially, the dacoit chief, they desired that a son be born to the chief. So they were looking for a man who was like an animal, idiot, not very intelligent, and they wanted to offer him to Goddess Kali. The dacoits had captured this man, but this man ran. So the dacoit chief said, come on, go and look for that man, or someone like him. So they couldn't find that man, but they found, when they saw Jat Bharat guarding the paddy field, they thought, this man looks exactly foolish like that man who ran away. He's a human being, but he's like an animal. So they brought him to the chief and said, hey, he's almost like the man who ran away. He's a human being, but he looks foolish like an animal. So we can slaughter him and give his blood for drinking to Goddess Kali. Jat Bharat, he was completely tranquil, peaceful, absorbed in his meditation on the Lord. Had it been any of us, we would have panicked, shouted, endeavored to run. But Jat Bharat, he didn't panic, he didn't try to run, he didn't scream, he was just absorbed in his meditation. Goddess Kali was so angry that these demons were trying to kill this beloved devotee of the Lord, that in great anger she came out of the deity, and with the same chopper that they were going to use in Jat Bharat, she slaughtered the dacoits. So Jat Bharat was fully protected by the Lord. So Kantya Pradijanahi na me bhakta pradashati. Krishna says, declare to the world that my devotee will never perish. So we gave you these examples to show that how these devotees were saved because their mind was totally absorbed positively in thinking of the Lord. In describing the ninefold process of devotional service, Gopāl Maharaja has listed Vishnu Smaranam after the first two, Shravanam and Kirtanam. So what does this mean?
Что это означает?
The Vishnu Smaranam becomes possible if your Shravanam and Kirtanam is attentive.
Что?
If your Shravanam and Kirtanam is regular, if you're hearing attentively, then Vishnu Smaranam will become easier. And if Shravanam Kirtanam is weak, then Vishnu Smaranam is going to be, just like Prabhupada said, whenever he would go to hear Bhakti Siddhanta, he would hear very attentively. Bhakti Siddhantaji remarked, this boy hears attentively, so he's going to preach attentively. So the mind is no doubt restless, turbulent, obstinate, very strong. We're not disputing that. But fortunately, by the mercy of the Lord and the sages, we have a solution. And if you take advantage of the solution, then you can be saved. So the whole process of Krishna consciousness is to bring us to the point that we can always remember Krishna and never forget. Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu has given us many do's and don'ts, rules and regulations. Rupa Goswami says, the purpose of all these rules and regulations is Krishna. Always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. You may say, this is an impossible goal for me to realize. It looks too utopian, theoretical. Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita, do the endeavor, then I make up what they lack and I preserve what they have. So we may have no qualification, we may have no ability, but if we endeavor, taking to the path of Guru Sadhu Shastra, Tat Tat Karma Pravartana, then this success can be realized. You've heard this saying, God helps those who help themselves. So we have to endeavor. Mother Yasoda was trying to tie Krishna down, but the rope was always 2 fingers. Then 2 ropes, 3 ropes, still it was short. Then the Lord said, my mother is getting impatient now, she's not happy. So let her tie me down. So he agreed to get tied. Similarly, if we endeavor by the path shown to us by the great sages, then success can be there. But it has to be there. You can't get anything sitting down. These days people approach, simply people say, can you give me God? And they expect some instant result without making the effort. The effort has to be there. Prabhupada used to say that even the lion, he has to endeavor hard to get his food. No one comes in front of the lion and says, oh, I know you're hungry, start eating. In fact, the animals in the forest run, flee, when they hear the roaring of a lion. So an animal catches one animal and keeps it in storage for 1 month. So we have to endeavor to become Krishna conscious. We have to endeavor to learn, to engage the mind and to control the mind and the senses. And if we sincerely endeavor, then the result is guaranteed to be there. Now another point we wish to touch on is the point that Prabhupada makes in the purport. Prabhupada talks about the protection of the woman in the purport. So Prabhupada describes how a woman must always be protected in the initial stage by the father, then by the husband, and then by the son. So, in our Krishna conscious movement, in the Vedic society, women are given full protection, and if the Vedic society offers a perfect solution, and if we live by these guidelines, then society can be happy and harmonious. So, a devotee endeavoring spiritually must learn to make friends with the mind, should not be pretenders. Prabhupada gave a story once that there was a prostitute and a Brahmin living opposite each other's house. The prostitute had to engage in simple activity. The Brahmana was making a show that I'm reading the scriptures, but his mind was thinking about the activities of the prostitute and her client. So there's a fire in which both the prostitute and the Brahmana died. So the Yamadutas came to the Brahmana to take him for punishment. The Brahmana said, you've come to the wrong address. You should go to the prostitute. She was doing all the dirty work. I was always reading the scriptures. She was doing the dirty work, but in her mind she was always thinking, when am I going to become like that Brahmana, always studying the scripture. And you were pretending as if you were reading the scriptures, but you were meditating on the prostitute's sex. So you come from like that. So the mind, so we should not be a pretender as the Bible gives. We endeavor to control the mind. Bhagavatam gives an example of once an arrow maker was sharpening his arrows, and he was so absorbed in sharpening arrows, and the whole entourage of the king passed by with trumpets blowing and all, but the arrow maker didn't get devoted. He was absorbed in his work. So similarly, if the mind is engaged positively, then you will not get distracted by the so-called illusory energy. In the purport, Prabhupada talks about Bhaktisiddhantaji's instruction that every morning our first business should be to beat the mind 100 times and then give you beat it before you go to sleep. Prabhupada said, beat the mind with a broomstick. You just have to be careful, you may not end up fracturing your head or end up in the hospital. Well, don't use the broomstick. But every morning remind yourself, my material mind is the biggest cheater. I should not become a slave of my mind and sense. I must train my material mind to follow the spiritual mind of Vyasadeva and the representative. So if you remind yourself every morning and again in the night that that's what you should be doing, not listen to the mind that's a cheater, then your spiritual sailing will be easy. The uncontrolled mind is compared to an unbridled horse. You're sitting on an unbridled horse, you can be thrown off the horse at any time. So on the devotional path, if you don't endeavor to control your mind, you can get devoted at any time. You take advantage of the process, of the instructions given by the great acharyas, by the guru, by the sadhu, and the shastra. And if you sincerely endeavor, then success is guaranteed. Krishna is anxious to help us. Don't think that only Jat Bharat was saved, Amrish Maharaj was saved, and we have no scope. These stories are there to inspire us, to give us confidence, and also following in the footsteps of these great sages. Just like in material life, people have heroes. If you want to become a pop star, you have Michael Jackson. If you want to become a sports star, you have a sports star as a hero. So in the spiritual path, we also have heroes. And some of our heroes are Jat Bharat, Amrish Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj. So follow in their footsteps. So to summarize the verse, Lord Rishabhdev is continuing to emphasize the importance of making friends with the mind. And how do we make friends with the mind? By following the advice given in the scripture. And every spiritualist must make a sincere endeavor. And if you endeavor, we'll succeed. Otherwise, as Lord Rishabhdev here explains, your we run the risk of getting thrown off the horse. You run the risk of ruining your spiritual life. And when you hear about this in the association of devotees, you get more and more enthusiastic and determined to follow this advice. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.